We'll cover short rider tricks for taking this 830-pound bagger off the kickstand, reaching the kickstand, and moving it around tight spaces, like for parking. I am 5'3.75 inches tall and can barely do 5 proper push-ups. I'm working on it. So when I borrowed 2 baggers for 2 road trips across 3,000 miles, while my bike that weighs half what these weighed was still in the shop, these are the quick tips I did to be able to handle a big bagger that didn't have short rider modifications. I'm not that short, I'm 5'3.75 inches tall, but I am short enough that I need to tiptoe on the bikes I want to ride. So I needed a lot of short rider tips, and on this Road Glide, even though the seat height is pretty low, it's 28 inches high, it's really wide, so I'm still tiptoeing on it. And if you're tiptoeing on a bike, like me, that's when accidents happen. And I'll show you how I handle the weight of this bike. So this is the Moto Police Officer entry, so you can get on your bike without being in traffic. Putting the weight over this kickstand as much as possible. Foot on the floorboard. I guess it's not a peg on a big bagger. So first things is this bike is 830 pounds. I usually ride bikes that are about 400 pounds. So to take it off the kickstand for me, it's not happening. I'm really trying, as you can see. So what I do is I turn, this is the tip I got from Donna Palladino, because she's shorter than me and she rides a Harley Electra Glide. Turning the handlebars all the way to the right first. So I think the Street Glide handlebars are a little bit heavier feeling because the fairing's attached. So I'll show you another trick what you can do. So if it's still hard to turn, even then, what I would do on the Street Glide is I would bump my hip, and on each little bump, I would turn the handlebars. And that just lightens that front wheel a bit. And that's what I would do on the Street Glide or even on this bike if I'm not on a totally flat plane. And then taking off the kickstand is much easier. And if you're still having difficulty, say you're even smaller than me, here's another trick you can do. Once the wheel is turned away from the kickstand, using your hip to bump it over. I needed to do this on the Street Glide sometimes. Just make sure you don't bump it so hard you send it all the way to Timbuktu. And now it's upright. So, first issue resolved. Once I'm actually sitting back on the bike, as you can see, I'm not completely flat foot. Close, but not quite. If I'm up a bit forward, I can actually flat foot. So I would do this sometimes when I'm stopped at a light in traffic, just to give myself a more stable brake. But what I do on bikes that I'm too tall on is I do 1 foot down. Like this. And this is how I stop dropping bikes at stoplights that I'm tiptoeing on. Now this bike, it is double the weight of what I'm used to. So what I would do is I wouldn't stop right away with just 1 foot down, especially when I was getting used to the weight of this at stoplights. So I would stop with both feet, but just plant one a little heavier than the other. So I'm not on toes on both sides. I'm flat on one, just kind of tapping the ground on the other, if you can reach. And then another trick. So on the Street Glide, it was actually a little harder for me to reach the kickstand. A lot of times I would just stretch and hope, and it'd take me a few tries to bring it back. On the Road Glide, I can reach it. So one thing you can do is, I know Jerry Palladino, I think he's 5'8" or 5'7", and he added an extender to his kickstand. So that's something you can do. I saw one guy on a Harley Street Glide do some short rider tips, and on his, he can lift the floorboard. So lifting the floorboard, I can't do it on this bike, but, never mind. You can lift up the floorboard, and you can reach the kickstand a little easier. There's a little more room there. So next tricky thing is, I highly recommend, if you're a smaller person and you get this bike, taking a slow speed skills class and taking it multiple times. Because without that, if just stop and go traffic, slow speed skills, this would be miserable. Because I didn't have practice on my tight U-turn skills, I did end up in some pickles sometimes, and I'll tell you how I resolved that by myself. First, I trying my best to just I made sure to be hyper focused anytime I came to a stoplight, looking at the angle of the street, if it's at all angles in one side of the other. And since I'm not putting 2 feet down flat, I'm putting really more weight on one foot than the other. So just making sure that I'm putting my foot down on the high side of the street if it's slightly angled. Because I've definitely put my foot down on the low side of the street and dropped a top heavy bike. So another thing is parking. So that can be a big pain. Of course, always trying to do a turn so that I'm pointing out of a parking spot so that I can just ride on out. Sometimes, maybe I forgot or I just messed up or I was in a new parking spot. I'll show you what I do, and this is what I do on bikes that are too tall for me to duck walk. It's difficult, but it works, especially if you're in a tight spot and nobody's around to help you push it, because there is no shame in just asking for someone to help you push it while you're duck walking and struggling. No shame at all. So what I'll do is I basically lean a bike against my hip and move it that way. That's what I'll do when a bike is too tall. So it's up against my hip, and with these bikes so heavy, normally I'll go to the non-kickstand side because I've dropped my bike before moving it like this on a very hot and tired day, and I was on the kickstand side. It fell right into the garage wall, but only once. I do it all the time, and when I do it on a bagger, just because it is so much heavier, I do it on the kickstand side, but I don't make it go totally upright. Because I want to look at the kickstand and see, I may even almost scrape it on the ground just to know that it's not going too far over. So ideally you can be in neutral, but if not, I'll show you. It can be done. So yeah, it'll take me 15 minutes just to turn around, but it's doable. So really, the main reason I'm not doing it on the non-kickstand side is because it's just so much harder for me to bring it up. On a mid-level sport bike, I can just pull it and bring it up to my hip, but with this bike, even if I turn the front wheel, it's still hard. So I just take it on the side, it's already low. So I move it backwards, but I don't like to move it forwards with this method because I like to keep the kickstand down. I like to keep it low so that I know it's not going too far to the other side. So what I'll do is to go forward, I'll just turn it on and let the friction zone do it. For my short, petite riders that want to ride a big bike just because you want to show the others that you can do it. So what if you struggle sometimes? If you want to do something, do it. Yeah, a smaller bike may be easier to ride, but maybe you don't want to ride a smaller bike. Maybe you want the big bike. And why avoid something that you really want just because sometimes when you park, it's going to take a little more effort? So what? By the time I return this one, I'll be at about 3,000 miles on baggers between the street glide and the road glide. See you in the next one.